from West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
The West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission, working with students and families to improve college access and student success for a better West Virginia.
Good evening, I'm Andrea Lanham at the Capitol Building in Charleston, and this is the Legislature Today. As teachers in selected counties stage walk-ins and walkouts, the governor canceled a scheduled press conference this morning where it was planned he would talk about education issues. Hundreds of teachers rallied here at the Capitol. Senior reporter Dave Mistich brings us their message.
Hundreds of West Virginia teachers and school service personnel braved below freezing temperatures and rallied Friday at the state capitol for better pay and benefits. While organized work stoppages came from those in Mingo, Logan, and Wyoming counties, teachers from elsewhere around the state also made their way to the Rotunda in Charleston. The rally came as the upper chamber considered Senate Bill 267, which calls for a 1% salary increase. The bill passed on a 33-0 vote and now heads to the House. Dale Lee of the West Virginia Education Association and Christine Campbell of the American Federation of Teachers West Virginia say the passage of Senate Bill 267 is encouraging, even if the 1% raise included in the bill isn't as much as they wanted.
I think having that bill passed today actually gives it some more momentum to go. I think that it had to pass at 1%, but we'll see what the House does with it if they look to increase that. I think people are not going to be okay when the pay raise that's being proposed and passed so far is going to outweigh the increases in their insurance.
Right. And you have to remember, it's early in the session, so that the vehicle is moving now. And there can be a whole lot of amendments made to it, and the House can do with it what they choose. And we're hoping to make strides in the House.
Lee and Campbell say teacher pay is just one element fueling growing frustrations. Concerns over PEIA premium and deductible increases, as well as other currently proposed requirements of the insurance provider, have also stoked the flames. For the Legislature Today, I'm Dave Mistich at the Capitol.
Joining me now for our regular Friday evening wrap-up and look ahead are State House reporters Brad McElhenney of West Virginia Metro News and Ryan Quinn of the Charleston Gazette-Mail. Guys, thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Hey.
So before we get into the session floor speeches, Brad, we all saw the teachers flood the Capitol today. What are your estimates on the number of teachers?
Oh my gosh, I had to do a crowd estimate. Let me just say, I haven't seen it this way. I was standing on the stairs at the Senate and was looking out through, and it was shoulder to shoulder, back to back, all the way down to the House. And I know there were people downstairs too in the lower rotunda. It really was just 3 counties that were supposedly here today, mostly from southern West Virginia. Mingo, McDowell, Wyoming,
Raleigh.
Southern West Virginia counties for the most part. But boy, they did the job of filling the place. And beyond that, as we were in the floor sessions in either house, you could absolutely hear people outside. They made their presence known.
I believe they were outside the building as well, because I saw them when I was walking in outside each wing.
Yeah, it was the same way right outside the front doors of the House. It was like a sea of red, which was the color that many of them chose to wear, and you could see it go all the way back to the other side of the upper rotunda to the doors of the Senate. And yeah, you could hear them inside the House when I was on the House floor. Armstead actually, the Speaker of the House, actually came down from the podium and actually addressed the House, which to my understanding is a rare occurrence. And while that was going on, you can hear them singing "Na na na na, hey hey hey, goodbye" outside the doors.
A reference to the upcoming election?
I believe so. I mean, there was also chants more directly of, we remember in November. Now I don't think Armstead's actually going to be running again for a delegate seat, but perhaps that was addressed to others on all these issues that they're concerned about.
Now, Ryan, I know you were scheduled, and I think Brad and I were both scheduled to cover this as well. The governor's press conference this morning, and it was canceled. Did you guys hear anything why it was canceled?
Well, the justice actually went on Hoppy Kercheval's show and spoke about why it was canceled. I don't know if you want to fill in on that.
Yeah, so the governor essentially said so much was going on up here, described it almost like a fluid situation. He just didn't think the time was right. It seemed to be no coincidence to me that there were a lot of things going on politically at the Greenbrier, which the governor's family owns, yesterday. President of the United States was there. And, you know, frankly, there was freezing weather overnight. Roads were pretty sketchy. The governor did not cite those reasons, but to me that might have been part of the makeup of why there was not a press conference this morning.
Yeah, he wasn't here for it. It did not seem to be. I asked staff. I came in around the time the press conference was supposed to start at 10:30, and he wasn't here, according to them. And he did show up later in the day. I think about 1:20 is when this event started, something around then, for Governor Tomlin's portrait unveiling. So he actually showed up to that event, but he kind of disappeared quickly from the press conference room. I believe he told Hoppy that he wanted, he said that they're still working out details in regards to something, and also made a reference to cooler heads prevailing. But he also said during that appearance on Hoppy's show that there was that he was going to be steadfast behind the 1% pay raise that he's proposed, which is obviously one of the things that teachers are upset about. They're upset it's not higher than that.
You know, a press conference under these conditions with so many people here would have been a real challenge. Crowd control was a challenge all day, I could tell. And early this morning, maybe you were there too, there was just a crowd of people in the governor's reception room, just absolutely packed the place. And you can imagine if the governor had spoken publicly, people would have wanted to hear what he said. And I think it's the right to hear what the governor says, but I think it would have been just a challenge given the heightened emotions and the situation to have spoken in a procedural way. I do think that people would have liked to have heard directly from the governor today.
Now, Brad, I know you did a timeline today of how the events unfolded. Can you kind of take me through how you pursued covering the day's events?
Well, yeah, I worked this out with my bosses last night, thinking that, you know, every moment today was going to be of interest. And at the time, I really thought that House Finance was going to take up a pay raise bill this morning, and that teachers would arrive, that the governor would have his press conference at 10:30, that we would have a Senate floor vote. So I just thought things were going to move so procedurally, you know, almost like clockwork, that I needed to be on time for all of it. So we took a live blog approach with a lot of sort of video and just brief synopses of what had happened throughout the day. And, you know, that was great because I wound up getting to interact with some of the teachers who were here. You know, where are you from? Who are you? What is on your mind? One thing that surprised me, talking to people, my mind was on the pay raise issue because that was the legislation that was being considered. But almost 100% of the individual teachers I talked to said PEIA is the most important thing to me.
Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, that seems to be, I've heard that from teachers as well. Armstead, in fact, said that in his speech on the floor, that he's heard that PEIA is the biggest issue. And actually, on the House floor, that's when Delegate Espinagle tried to actually discharge from the House Education Committee a pay raise bill, I think just for teachers, at least that's how delegates explained it on the floor, tried to discharge it from House Education Committee in a way that would bring it to the floor faster. There was then some discussion about, you know, can that actually be done? Would that speed things up? It was eventually tabled by motion of the Majority Leader Coles. But that was an interesting situation because there were service personnel for schools and teachers filling all the galleries around the top of the chamber. And it was Armstead had to gavel them down several times because of they were clapping at things various delegates said. But this was all, right before they were about to get a pay raise bill from the Senate, which did in fact pass a pay raise bill today, although of course not with the levels that a lot of them wanted.
Is that motion to discharge what prompted the Speaker to come down and speak?
No, he came down and just gave a general speech about how he was working on the pay raise issue, but particularly talking about some of the progress he said has been made with trying to pull back on some of the things that have angered teachers regarding PEIA, the Go 365 program, and the combined using or considering combined family income and premiums for PEIA. So he spoke a lot about that and just kind of, as others did, talked about how this is a big priority for them. And he said that this was, pay and benefits for public employees was the biggest priority, he said, for him and the one he's been spending the most time on. But referenced that, work is being done in other places and it's not necessarily apparent right now on the House floor.
Now, as both of you have referenced, there's been a lot of floor speeches today, both in the House and the Senate. In the Senate, after an amendment was offered by Democrats calling for a 3% increase, and that was yesterday. Senate Bill 267 was up for vote today, like we've discussed. And there was a lot of passionate speeches with that. Here's what Senator Beach had to say.
I'm going to support this bill for that 1%. I don't support the 1% by any means, but I do support us giving something to and keeping this bill moving forward. But it's unfortunate that we're at a position in our state's history right now with teachers and service personnel and public employees and state troopers that these folks have to break away from the classroom to come down here to get their message across.
So that was Democrat Senator Beach. What speeches specifically stood out to you in today's floor sessions? Brad, I'll start with you in the Senate.
Right. Well, as you and I discussed before the session began, or before our session began, there were some metaphors. Senator Romano described the pay raise as being $8 a week, and he says, "What could you get for that? Maybe a decent lunch once a week." And then Senator Unger, one of his Democratic colleagues, said this 1% is like going out for a great meal and providing a penny tip. And then when he concluded his tip, he flipped what I took to be a penny in the air. He was pretty far from us and said, "There's my penny." So, there are two things going on. People believe what they believe and passions are running high, but some of these folks are up for elections, and there were crowds here today, and in addition to being sincere in their beliefs, I think there was also some performance going on.
Now, Ryan, besides the House Speaker's speech, was there anything that really stood out to you in the House today?
Well, Spudernagel, as he's apt to do, gave sort of a firebrand speech talking about how the governor has proposed cutting industrial taxes or taxes on inventory, phasing that out over time, and talking about how that, according to him, is eventually a $140 million hole in the budget, and then talking about investments that the governor has suggested to be in tourism, and just contrasting that with the idea that it's only worthwhile to give, well, I shouldn't say worthwhile, but contrasting that with the idea that the governor has only proposed a 1% pay raise this year, and then also proposed to lock that in as 1% pay raises for the next several years after this. Now, of course, I think that could be changed next session, but it does seem like you're locking employees in and to that 1% if you're passing a bill that says that much this session. So that's one of the ones that I recalled.
We heard that those same points echoed in the Senate too with the business inventory tax, didn't we, Brad?
Oh man, there was so much, it's a matter of will, it's a matter of priorities yesterday, because these amendments were up to try to increase the amount of the raise. And so that was the point the Democrats were making. The point the Republicans were making is we think we're on the verge, not well into, but on the verge of an economic recovery that's loosening up the budgetary constraints, but we're not there yet, the Republicans said. And they believe that these other priorities that were questioned are going to result in further generation of the economy. Whether that's the case or not, that's a matter of faith, but they say they have faith in it.
I know too, we heard several lawmakers say that they understand their frustrations and they're working on these issues of pay raises and PEIA. And I heard in some of the speeches, maybe we can do something else next year. Do you think that this is something that teachers are going to accept? Ryan, I'll start with you.
No, I don't think they will, because I haven't seen anything like this, where you actually have walkouts in counties. And I think at least Mingo, Wyoming, and Logan, and then some counties were closed anyway because of weather, so those teachers may have shown up too. But I think we've reached a point where they've been told next year for several years now, and they just, it's obviously from today's events, it seems like it's reached a critical point. Now, I think that it seems like all the legislative leaders seem to be focused on this, at least by their speeches and what they're saying publicly. So perhaps further walkouts will be avoided.
I think next week's going to be very interesting. I mean, the point was clearly made today, but this was technically, I think, 3 counties that were involved in walkouts, which leaves, according to my math, 52 counties we still may see here, with a little more than half the session left. So are we going to see floods of red again, making this point as this legislation goes to the House? And the governor has asked the PEIA finance boards to come together for public hearings in mid-February. Whether people feel that they need to make a point on that matter here at the Capitol remains to be seen also.
So after the bill passed through the Senate, the teacher pay raise bill, what kind of reaction did you guys get outside the chambers? I know there was a lot of chanting going on while the Senate and the House were in session. What did you guys hear after this was passed?
That's an unfair question, because you know as well as I do, you and I rushed Senate President Carmichael and listened to him for about 5 minutes. And his comments were very interesting. I mean, the first thing he began with was praise for what had felt to me like a pretty divisive conversation in the House. But he said he was very proud of both the majority and the minority in the way they conducted themselves, which wound up with a 33-0 vote to send this bill to the House. But by the time Senate President Carmichael finished speaking and I packed up my bag and we shot out the side door, things were kind of breaking up. People seemed to be, I mean, they had long trips home, so they were starting to get on their buses and their cars or whatever, dispersing. But it was still a pretty good crowd. Had I not seen the giant crowd earlier, I would have thought the dispersed crowd was still pretty impressive.
Ryan, did you hear anything after you got out of the House floor session?
No, unfortunately, I was also rushing on to other things. But I mean, Ms. Stitch was able to talk to the 2 teacher union heads and talked about how this passage in the Senate today is now an ability for the House to get at it and make changes if there's will in that body to do so. So I'd like to see, I wish I were there at the time when the senators were actually getting out of those double doors over on that side, but I was not there.
So let's go back to some of those floor speeches in the House especially. Delegate Caputo also had some comments that he shared today.
I'm not happy. In 22 years, I've never seen such chaos in the House of Delegates. We're at crisis stage, ladies and gentlemen. The people of West Virginia want us to act and quit talking about turkey breasts. I've never seen such chaos. We're coming apart at the seams. And it's a shame the public's out there watching this crap go on across West Virginia, and we're talking about 9 million issues that don't affect the livelihood of the people we should be protecting. It's time to act. It's time to act.
Now, several Democrats went on to say that it was outrageous to think about eliminating the business inventory tax, which we had discussed from some of the comments in the House and Senate. Ryan, what was your reaction to Delegate Caputo's speech?
I began recording it because it was gotten to that point where I was like, wow, this is something else. I can't remember whether it was him or it was another delegate. He was certainly, he and Spinagle seemed to have the most loud in volume speeches, but there was either him or another delegate came out with just talking about all the different things that were supposed to be a silver bullet to West Virginia's economy, whether it was, right to work or eliminating the business franchise tax. I think stuff going back to when Democrats led the legislature and tax cuts they made. And it just, now we're supposed to be given, this person was bringing up another silver bullet by reducing taxes yet again on the inventory and personal property in that manner, and saying that this is something that again, this is not going to work out.
So what do you think that this Senate bill, what's going to happen to this Senate bill when it goes over to the House? Brad, what do you think?
I thought it was interesting to hear in your video the two teachers union presidents talk with hope from their point of view that maybe there's going to be some amending, maybe the amount goes up, and I think that's possible. I feel like there's been a real slowdown in the last week or so of some of the other spending issues. I spent a week covering the Intermediate Court of Appeals, which would have a price tag of a few $1 million. The community college subsidy bill that would pay down part of students' tuition under certain conditions did pass out of the Senate this week. That was a milestone that President Carmichael was pretty happy about. Don't know where that stands in the House, but these are things where if particularly in the House, if they think, well, maybe we could get to 2%, maybe we could get to 3%. Don't just start looking at things like that to say, we got to hold the line somewhere. We can't spend on everything. And the question of the property tax on industrial manufacturers being phased out over a period of time, that would actually require a constitutional amendment. So it's got a long way to go, and I haven't seen a lot of movement on it yet, and we are halfway through. Is that something where, as much as Republicans have wanted to do it for many years, do they say, it's not the year?
It has been a really big week here for education issues in particular. You brought up the community college bill. Ryan, I know that you've been covering that. What do you think the House is going to do when they take that up?
The House seems to have a lot of concerns with the cost of that, and I'm actually wondering whether the whole argument as to whether we're going to have higher teacher raises may have some impact on the fate of that bill. It passed out of the Senate without some of the changes that experts had suggested, as far as getting rid of the residency requirement, and other people have been recently criticizing the drug testing requirement on it. But these are the kind of things that are also seeming to fit more with the conservative ideology of this is not just a benefit that we're handing out, free tuition. This is something that you have to earn by passing through these certain hurdles, among them staying in the state for 2 years after actually graduating a community college with free tuition.
I wouldn't be surprised if delegates also get nudged by the four-year institutions in their communities.
Yeah.
Glenville, Bluefield, you know, maybe not this break for community colleges. Keep the freshmen coming our way.
Yeah.
Now we only have about a minute left. Just tell me a little bit about what you'll be watching next week. Brad, I'll start with you.
Oh, I mean, my mind is on the teacher pay raise issue, and I thought we were coming into this session with natural gas and the Supreme Court as the major issues of the session. The teacher issue has taken over all of that.
Ryan, what about you?
It seems that that's sucked up all the air in the room, and I'm going to be looking at that next week, but also trying to see what happens with the community college bill, trying to see whether they're going to take that state school board election bill out of subcommittee or just leave it in there and actually let it die.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Brad McElhenney with West Virginia Metro News and Ryan Quinn of the Charleston Gazette-Mail. Thank you both. That does it for West Virginia Public Broadcasting's coverage from the state capitol this week. Join us for the Legislature Today on Monday as we pick up our coverage of the activity here at the State House, including a focus on a task force report on child sexual abuse by the Joint Committee on Education. We'll discuss the report and recommended legislation with the Executive Director of the West Virginia Child Advocacy Network. I'm Andrea Lanham for the Legislature Today. Thanks for joining us tonight and have a great weekend.